And we started on this. Oh, you know what? I guess I should officially put one more. Give me 1 second. So what I should have done is this. Okay. All right. So we're gonna start. We started last time I spoke. We started speaking about public enemy number 1, and this is part 2. Understanding the adversary, part 2. Yeah. And I'm gonna do a small recap just to kind of connect back to where we were, what we looked at. And we looked at a few things. We started out just talking about hasatan and understanding that Satan 1 means adversary, resist. Okay? We talked about the letters that involved in hasatan's name, or this title, and it being, and I forgot to correct that. It's not Tav, it's Tet. Sin, Tet, Nun. And looking at those letters and what they stood for, we looked at how the sin has that dot instead of over the right side, it's over the left side, making that sin sound. And we talked about the Tav. The Tet. Again, I got to correct that. I keep forgetting to. But the Tet being that serpent. And then we talked about the Nun, that last final Nun, being, I believe that was the seed. And so we talked about that. And we also then talked about the objectives of what we're trying to cover in understanding the adversary. And one, we want to try to get an understanding of who and what he is, one. What his objective is was the second thing that we went over. We began to talk a little bit about what his authority level is as well. And then also, today I'm going to continue on what his authority level is. And I told you that that would probably take, in and of itself, the majority of this teaching. And then we're going to go into what his future is. And so we talked a little bit first about what he is not, just to establish a few things, and quite frankly undo some things that we have been taught and developed into believing and practicing, right? And so one thing is understanding that he is not the opposite and equal of Yahweh. So he's Yahweh's adversary, yes. He goes against Yahweh, but he's also our adversary. He's not the equal and opposite of us either. He was created with the heavenly host. He was created as a messenger. That's what he is. That's what he started out as. That's what he will end up as. That's what he is now. He is not the equal and opposite of Yahweh, which means he does not have the same powers that Yahweh has. One of which is that he is not omnipresent. That is probably one of the biggest errors that people make, is believing that Satan is omnipresent, that he can be in more than one place at one time. He cannot. I have yet to see any place in the scripture where he is in more than one place at one time, and I've yet to see any place in the scripture where any other messenger is in more than one place at one time. Yet to see that. So, because we know he's a messenger, we now can understand some of his limitations. One of which also is that he is not able to see the future. Right. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well today as we understand his level of authority. That he's not able to see the future. And I also made a point here to say, that is not to say that he does not try to predict the future, one. That also does not say that he does not try to create the future, two. Because he tries both. He tries to predict the future, and he also tries to create. So he tries to put things in order such that it ends up where he wants it to end up. But he can't go to the future and look back. He's not outside of time the way Yahweh is. The way Yahweh can look both past, future, present, all at one time. Yahweh is not bound by time. Hasatan is not bound by age, but he is bound by time. If it's happening now, he can witness it. If it happened in the past, he's probably witnessed it because, hey, he's a messenger, so he wasn't created to die a fleshly death, right? And so with that said, he was in the garden. He was in the garden, right? He's here now, still in the earth. These 5 plus 6,000 years later, he's still here. And so we talked about a few things, and I'm gonna, at this point, kind of blast through just a little bit. I don't want to reteach, but I do want to just kind of, I guess, remind would be a better thing. So we went to Job, and we talked about how in Job, Yahweh spoke to Hasatan. Hasatan came before Job, and before Yahweh. And it explained to us that Hasatan said to Yahweh that he was walking to and fro, seeing who he might devour. Well, it was the same thing that we saw in 1 Peter 5:8-9. That he is a roaring lion seeking someone to devour, is what 1 Peter 5:8 says. And then we went to Revelation 12:9, and the great dragon there was thrown out. And he was that great serpent of old, the devil and Satan. And it says that he leads all the world astray. And so we know now and understand, one, that as we look at what and who he is the devil. He is the serpent of old. So he was in the garden. He is also a messenger that would come before and goes before the throne of Yahweh, right? And so we also looked at Matthew 4, and we looked at where we can begin to understand his objective in wanting to receive worship and wanting Yeshua to bow before him, wanting man to bow before him, wanting Yahweh to be beneath him. Why? Because he says he will place his throne above Yahweh's. That's his goal, right? And I told you all, reading in the book of Adam and Eve, it even talks about the plight of the enemy and how he was perturbed at Yahweh's request for man to be worshipped, for the host of heaven to bow before man. And so his response was, you know what, this is kind of crazy, because I was made first. I'm greater. I'm this, I'm that, and you want me to bow before him? So his plight with Adam started when Adam was created. And so this is why he formulated this plan to get Adam and Hava to sin. And so in talking again about his objective, at the end of the day, he wanted to place his throne above in order to receive that worship. So that kind of brings us into now part 2. And in part 2, we're gonna continue in his level of authority. and understanding that he is a messenger, right? So let's go to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5, verses 6 through 9. Mark chapter 5, verses 6 through 9. And I think we read this, and I began to go through this last time, so we won't dwell here too long, but just more of a reiteration and introduction into the further parts. So Mark chapter 5, verses 6 through 9, and it reads, "And seeing Yeshua from a distance, he ran and bowed down to him, and having called out with a loud voice, said, 'What have I to do with you, Yeshua, Son of the Most High El? Swear to Elohim not to torture me.' For he had said to him, 'Come out of the man, unclean spirit.' And he was asking him, 'What is your name?' And he answered, saying, 'My name is Legion, because we are many.'" And remember, we explained, number one, here was the opportunity for him to say, "My name is Satan," right? But he didn't. Why? Because that wasn't Satan. It was Legion. It was many demons, right? And so that allows us, and remember, and I'll go back to this example that I used, which was understanding how even a CEO of a huge company works. And I use Pepsi as the example in that CEO's job is to get each and every one of us to want and to obtain a Pepsi, right? However, not one of us has ever sat down and had a conversation with the CEO of Pepsi in order to be convinced to do so. So he operates an organization. He runs an organization, right? And so that organization has people who are taking directives from him, and as they say, you are pursuing the corporate goals, right? So you are in pursuit of whatever that CEO has set as the direction for the corporation. So if we begin to think about it in that way, then we begin to know and understand that Hasatan is the CEO, right? He's the CEO of this world, right? So he is not here and there and everywhere. He can't be the Salesforce and the CEO and the CFO and the customer service, and he can't do all of that by himself. Why? We've established that he's a messenger. He is one being. And this verse lets us know and lets us in on a part of his organization. And so one, it lets us understand that his authority is over his demons, first of all. They go and do exactly what he says. His messengers. Right? So he has messengers, just as Yahweh has messengers. He has people that will go and do his biddings. And so this is an example for us where it says, "My name is Legion because we are many." Right? And so let's now go into Job chapter 1. And we're going to look at Job chapter 1, verses 6 through 12. Job chapter 1, verses 6 through 12. And the first thing I'm going to ask you is, and I know we haven't read it yet, but when we get to it, you'll understand. Could verse 8 be a rhetorical question? Could verse 8 be a rhetorical question? So let's read. Job 1, start at verse 6, go to verse 12. And it reads, "And the day came to be that the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yahweh. And Satan also came among them. And Yahweh said to Satan, 'From where do you come?' And Satan answered Yahweh and said, 'From diligently searching in the earth, and from walking up and down in it.' And Yahweh said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? that there is none like him on the earth, a perfect and straight man, one who fears Elohim and turns aside from evil? And Satan answered Yahweh and said, Is Job fearing Elohim for naught? Have you not made a hedge around him and around his household and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand, please, and strike all that he has, if he would not curse you to your face. And Yahweh said to Satan, See, all that he has is in your hand. Only do not lay a hand on himself. And Satan went out from the presence of Yahweh. So, number one, Satan came with the other messengers, right? Why? Because he's a messenger.
Right.
He wasn't out of place. He came with the other messengers because he's a messenger. Now, back to my question, verse 8. Because this has messed people up for a long time. This messed me up for a long time. Have you considered my servant Job? That's the question that Yahweh asked of Satan. But if you think about it in the respect of the question that I have on the board there, could this be a rhetorical question? What makes me say that? Well, what comes next? Hasatan tells you everything about him. He says, you got him protected on every side. How does he know that? Because he tried. Only way I know that all the doors are locked is if I what? Juggled all them handles, right? That's how I knew. So when you say to me, well, have you tried the back door? I already know you tried the back door and it's locked because I locked it. So his question to Satan wasn't like a, well, maybe you should go see if you can get Job. It wasn't a suggestion that Satan had not considered. This wasn't an idea that Yahweh wanted to test out. This was Yahweh calling Satan on knowing what he was doing. So Satan came back and said, yeah, I tried him. What you mean, have I considered him? I can't get in. You got all the doors locked. But I bet if you unlock one of them, let me in there, I'll mess them up. And so he already knew. One, that also helps us understand Satan's level of authority. Because first he had to ask permission. Because who Yahweh has sealed, he can't break. He can't break the seal. Now, can Job step outside into harm's way? Absolutely he can. Absolutely. But as long as Job is under the protective covering of Yahweh, hasatan can't touch him without permission. Without permission. It lets us understand again the level of authority that hasatan has. He had to ask permission to touch whom Yahweh has sealed. He who Yahweh has covered, hasatan has to ask permission to touch them. Now, let's go now to Jude. Again, we're talking about the level of authority. Hasatan's level of authority. Let's go to Jude. We're going to go to Jude chapter 1. And we're going to read Jude 1, verse 6. I'm sorry, 4 through 6. Jude 1, verses 4 through 6. And it reads, For certain men have slipped in, whose judgment was written about long ago. Wicked ones perverting the favor of our Elohim for indecency, and denying the only master, Yahweh, and our master, Yeshua Messiah. But I intend to remind you, though you once knew this, that Yahweh, having saved a people out of the land of Mitzrayim, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. And the messengers who did not keep their own principality. Understand what he's saying right there. The messengers who did not keep their own principality. These were those who decided that they were not on the Lord's side, but they was on Satan's side. Mm-hmm. So when he went, they went, right? There were those who believed that Satan would accomplish his goal. And they wanted to be on his side. And so this is those who this speaks of. And it says, and the messengers who did not keep their own principality, but left their own dwelling. Their dwelling was in the heavenlies. He has kept in everlasting shackles under darkness for the judgment of the great day. So we are now getting an understanding of some of this world that hasatan exists in, right? Some of this world that he exists in. And let's go now in understanding this a little bit better. Let's go, we're going to go into Ephesians, but you know what? 1 second. I want to read. All right, let's go ahead to, before we go there, let's see. Yeah, let's read down a little bit further first. Let's read down a little bit further first. So let's go to verse 7, and we're going to read from 7 to 9. And 10. Let's go ahead and read 10. So 7 through 10, still in Jude, okay? So starting at verse 7, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them in a similar way to these, having given themselves over to whoring and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example, undergoing judicial punishment of everlasting fire. This is speaking of where they are headed to, right? And we understand what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. That was their ending. It was fire. It was fire. Verse 8, in the same way, indeed, these dreamers defile the flesh and reject authority and speak evil of set-apart ones. Verse 9, but Michael, the chief messenger, in contending with the devil, when he disputed about the body of Moshe, presumed not to bring against him a blasphemous accusation, but said, Yahweh rebuke you. Not to bring against him a blasphemous accusation, but he said Yahweh. Not even Michael said to him, I rebuke you, Satan.
Right. Sure did.
Y'all get that?
Yeah.
Not even Michael, the archangel, the one who goes and fights when it's time to fight hasatan. You don't pull out little itty bitty humans.
No.
Michael defended.
Right.
And not even Michael rebuked Satan in his own speech. He says, Yahweh rebuke you. Right? Mm-hmm. And in verse 10, but these blaspheme that which they do not know. And that which they know naturally, like unreasoning beasts, in these they corrupt themselves. I'll stop right there. So now let's go into, to get a better understanding of what we're talking about, is this worldly system versus the Yahweh system. The worldly, the nations, you know, we've grown up in this ambiguous religious world, right? Where everything we speak is like spiritual rather than understood, right? And so we've been talking about the world for the longest. What is the world according to the scripture? The nations. Everybody outside of Yahweh's people. The nations. And so the ways of the nations is really what he's referring to. Let's go to Ephesians now. Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11 through 13. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11 through 13. Verse 11, put on the complete armor of Elohim for you to have power to stand against the schemes of the devil. Because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against the world rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual matters of wickedness in the heavenlies. Because of this, take up the complete armor of Elohim so that you have power to withstand in the wicked day, and having done all, to stand. Now, this is helping you understand how we fight against hasatan. Only Yahweh can fight against hasatan. Yahweh protects us. I rebuke you, Satan, doesn't work. I'm sorry. We just finished reading in Jude where he says, Michael rebuked, not in his name, according to his own authority, but he says, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Yahweh rebuke you. And so when we are told to fight against the devil, and we're told not to be taken away by those things that he has set in place, we need to stop looking for, again, this red-horned, red and black devil. This mythic being that we see on television and in the books and in the movies and in the cartoons and the stuff that we have grown to been able to almost injected with tomfoolery. It just doesn't make any sense because we now have this image, so everything wrong is the devil. And we have the power to rebuke. No. Help me understand if I'm wrong. But Yahweh rebukes Satan. Our job is to resist and to flee. Our job is to resist and to flee and stay in the place of protection. Just like Job, stay in the place of protection. And so again, what is it speaking of in Jude? We read from verse 4 really down to verse 10. It's speaking of the ways of the world. And Ephesians, I believe, helps us to clarify what he's trying to say. And in Ephesians, it's letting us know, hey, we have to be prepared, the armor of Elohim. And if we read on, you will then see what those armor and those pieces of armor are. But we've got to be looking out for the schemes. It says, for you to have power to stand against the schemes of the devil. So understand, looking for Satan himself to come and convince you to do something is probably not going to happen. So being that that's all we're trained to do and look for and talk to the devil and all of this stuff, meanwhile, all the schemes that he got set up for you, you've fallen in them. Head first, running toward them, looking for them, longing for them, asking for them, praying for them. We're begging for the schemes. So instead of begging for schemes, we need to be on the lookout to understand what they are and be able to recognize them. So when we can understand and get past this wrongful thinking that we have, then maybe we can begin to see a little more clearly. That we can recognize those schemes when they come. We can recognize the systems that exist to trap. And I said this before, hasatan doesn't try to mess with one or two people. And in the cases that he did, it was strategic. And I think I used the example of the CEO of Pepsi talking to the CEO of Walmart. That makes sense. Because that could be a multi-million-dollar relationship. And he wants to make sure that the very best opportunity to solidify that relationship is there. Well, hasatan went and entertained Adam and Hava. If he wants to impact man, go to the first man ever created, yeah. I can see why. Yeshua, we're gonna get there, so I'm not gonna go too far. But his goal is to not get one or two, but is to get back at Yahweh, right? And so he impacts generations. He puts systems in place. We talked about doing violence against the kingdom. That's what hasatan is in business to do. He's not in business to do stuff that we blame him for. He's not. He's not. Now, and I want to reiterate again, I said this last time. We talked about the legions, so we know that he has an organization and he has others working for him that are on assignment. And we know that it rolls downhill. And we know that if you're calling on the name of Yahweh and you are a child of Yahweh, that he's knocking on your door too. So and when I say he, I mean in the form of these messengers that he has assigned. Just as we have assigned messengers from Yahweh to protect us and to keep us. Hasatan has his organization. He on point too. And so this is why we have to be so mindful to be cognizant of the schemes, of the wiles of the enemy, right? And so now let's go forward. Still speaking of his authority. Again, I don't want us to give him too much authority. And on the other hand, I don't want us to not give him enough. Because again, Michael rebuked him in the name of Yahweh. Michael knows where the power lies. And right here he speaks and says that we need to have on the armor of Elohim. Shaul says we need the armor of Elohim to have power to stand. And so you read down through the armor and everybody knows and is familiar with it. But especially if you have the new scriptures, understand and know where those scriptures are coming from. Shaul didn't make that up. This is actually spoken of in the prophets. And I want to say Isaiah spoke most of them. Isaiah spoke most of them. And so you can go back and you look at what it's speaking of from the scripture standpoint. And this is what Shaul is pulling from and speaking. He didn't look at no Roman soldier. No. This was a Levitical priest that he was describing. From head to toe, describing a Levitical priest, not a Roman soldier. Let's now get into, again, we're still looking at the level of authority of hasatan. And at the end of the day, we've identified that he needed permission to touch those that were sealed by Yahweh. And that at the name of Yahweh, there's protection. Because even Michael said, Yahweh rebuke you, right? And so Yahweh was rebuked, or Satan was rebuked in the name of Yahweh. Not in our own name. It's not, I rebuke you, Satan. It's not, I'm going to step on your head because, and Shaul cleared that up. That seed is as of one. One will crush his head. And that is Yeshua. Not you, not me, so we're not going to stomp, stomp, stomp. No. All you doing is stomping for no reason. So again, our job is to resist and to flee right? Not to rebuke in our own name. Not to I call you down, Satan, and you have to leave this place and blah, 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 whatever. You're just really talking for no reason, because I doubt he's there to hear you. So let's go to Zechariah now. Zechariah 1, chapter 3, we're going to read verses 1 and 2. Again, understanding now the level of authority that Hasatan has. And it reads, Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. And he showed me Yehoshua, the high priest, standing before the messenger of Yahweh, and Satan standing at his right hand to be an adversary to him. And Yahweh said to Satan, who said to Satan?
Yahweh.
Yahweh said to Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan.
Right.
Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Yahweh, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked from the fire? And you have to read the rest of Zechariah. Go back to chapter 1, and really you got to read up, because as Zechariah is being taken into visions, and Yahweh is taking him and showing him, and just as Yochanan, we see in Revelation where he is taken and different messengers speak to him and show him things. This is what was being done right here. And so Zechariah is now seeing an interaction between Hasatan and Satan. And at the end of the day, Satan cannot do anything beyond what Yahweh allows him to do. So when Yahweh rebukes him and says, this is my people that I'm plucking from this fire, then even though you've gotten them off path and they have fallen from my Torah and they doing all kind of foolishness, that Zechariah is seeing the redemption of Jerusalem and seeing the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And so if you read a little further, you'll see that this is around the time that they would have been preparing, and this is the prophesying of the building of Zerubbabel's temple. And so he's showing him these things. But again, I want to key you in right there where he says, Yahweh rebuke you. His level of authority. His level of authority. Now, in understanding that his authority is limited, that he can't see in the future, right? This is proven, and we'll see this in the next few scriptures that we're going to go through. So let's go to Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22, and we're gonna skip around in chapter 22 just a little bit. So we're gonna start with verse 3. Luke chapter 22, verse 3, and it says, and Satan entered into Yehuda, who was called man from Kerioth, who was numbered among the 12. We know who that is, right? So Satan entered into him. Now, a little bit of backdrop of where we are. We are preparing and at the time of Passover, right? So we are about to enter into this time of Passover. We all know what happens when it's said and done, right? They finish eating Passover. They go to the garden. Yehuda comes with people from the Sanhedrin and from the rulers of the land, and they come and begin to interrogate and eventually find guilty Yeshua of blasphemy, and we know what happens next. So that's where we're at. We're at the beginning of that happening. Now, understand, Hasatan can't see the future, so he doesn't know what's coming, but he's trying to figure it out. He's been trying to get back at, now he's got Yeshua on the earth. So here's my shot. This is my shot. Like, come on, let's eat bread and drink together. Like, come on, let's jump off this. I'll give you all. He's trying everything. I'll give you everything. He's trying it all. And so now he's entered into Yehuda to do what? Now betray Yeshua. Set him up, and I got you. Now I got you. Because I got one. I got one. And so now let's go down to verse 31. Verse 31, chapter 22, verse 31. Remember what just happened? Hasatan entered Yehuda to betray Yeshua. Now, verse 31. And the master said, Shimon, Shimon, see, Satan has asked for you to sift you as wheat. Is this the first person that Satan has asked for? Was Job also not one that he had asked for? He asked for him. He said, I want at him. And right here, Yeshua reveals to Shimon, this is Kepha, this is Peter, that Satan has asked for you by name. He wants you. Why? Look at what Kepha will do. Look at what will end up being of Kepha. Look at the impact. And so he's trying to figure out, which one can I get? Which one can I get? It's not because he knows the future. Because he just got Yehuda, right? He got Yehuda. He thinks he needs to kill Yeshua right now. That's what I want you to understand. He thinks that he needs to kill Yeshua. So he's looking for now Peter. In verse 32 it says, but I have prayed for you that your belief should not fail. And when you have turned, strengthen your brothers. Let's now go to verse 49. We're going to read 49 through 51. Now, y'all understand, he entered into Yehuda, and he's setting up this whole betrayal. He's tried to get Peter, right? Yeah. But Yeshua stopped that right now, right? But then something happens. In verse 49, and those around him, seeing what was about to take place, said to him, Master, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them, we know which one that is, Kepha, struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Yeshua answering said, allow it this far. And touching his ear, he healed him. He healed him. Now, we just read this today. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 21, verses 16 through 20. And we're going to go back and explain that just a little bit. Leviticus chapter 21, verses 16 through 20. And it reads, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to Aaron, saying, no man of your offspring throughout their generations who has any defect is to draw near to bring the bread of his Elohim. For any man who has a defect is not to draw near, a man blind or one lame or disfigured, as in missing an ear, or deformed, a man who has a broken foot or broken hand, missing ear, or is a hunchback or a dwarf, or a man who has a defect in his eye or eczema or a scab, or is a eunuch. And so they were not able to go, right? If he's missing an ear, he could not go. Now, let's go to Matthew chapter 6. Let's go to Matthew chapter 16, I'm sorry. Matthew chapter 16. And we're going to read starting in verse 13 down to 23. (13 to 23). So I'm going to read fast. I can't really read fast. So when I say fast, y'all probably looking like, you don't read fast, you can't even talk fast. But I'm going to read as fast as I read. Matthew 16, verse 13 through 23. Now when Yeshua came into the parts of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his taught ones, saying, who do men say the son of Adam is? And they said, some say Yohanan the Immerser, and others Eliyahu, and others Jeremiah, and one of the prophets. He said to them, and you, who do you say I am? And Shimon Kepha, same person we just got finished talking about. Remember, these are synoptic gospels. There are things that are going on at the same time being written about from different perspectives. And so let's go now, verse 16. And Shimon Kepha answering said, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim. And Yeshua answering said to him, blessed are you, Shimon Bar Yonah. For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in the heavens. And I also say to you that you are Kepha, and on this rock I shall build my assembly, and the gates of the grave shall not overcome it. And I shall give you the keys of the reign of the heavens, and whatever you bind on earth shall, having been bound in the heavens, and whatever you loosen on earth shall be having been loosened in the heavens. Then he warned his taught ones that they should say to no one that he is Yeshua the Messiah. From that time, Yeshua began to show to his taught ones that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem and to suffer much from the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and to be raised again the third day. And Kepha took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Be kind to yourself, master. This shall not be to you. Kepha said to Yeshua, I won't let you die. We just read where he cut his ear off, right? And y'all know what happened when he cut his ear off. What did he do? Yeshua put it back on. And we just read why he cut his ear off. Because we went to Leviticus 21 and read that the man would not have been able to go back into the temple.
Right.
That's why. He would not have been able to go back into the temple. With him not being able to go back into the temple, he can't deliver the message that needs to be delivered. Right. And then the ball can't continue rolling downfield for what to happen? Right. For Yeshua to be taken to the cross. And so Kepha is trying to stop it. Now we're rewinding a little bit to another part of the conversation. And right here in verse 22, he says, Be kind to yourself, master. This shall not be to you. I won't let them do it. Verse 23. But he, Yeshua, turned and said to Kepha, Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan. Now, why would he call at that minute Kepha Satan? He says to him, I won't let them kill you. Y'all remember, what cannot Satan see? Can't see the future. So in 1 second, he's trying to kill him, trying to kill him, trying to kill him. I need to kill him. I need to get him. And then he realizes, oh, snap. We can't kill him. If he dies an innocent man. He's never sinned. The wages of sin is death. I'm making a mistake. Now I need somebody who's willing to wield a sword to stop this thing. So he enters into Peter. And what does he do? What's in Peter's heart? Y'all listen. What's in Yehuda's heart? Greed, selfishness. So what did he use? Greed and selfishness. This is the same man I was like, whoa, 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 don't pour that expensive oil on his feet. I can sell that. This is the same man. He's the money carrier. He's the one who count the pennies and dollars and quarters and nickels. And so this one right here says, I'm going to stop this from happening because I love my master. So what do we see happening? He could only use what already existed. Couldn't make nothing else up. He used what already existed. With Yehuda, he used what existed. When he needed somebody that could stop this ball from rolling, he went to the one that was willing to die for his master. The one that already said, it ain't going down. And he entered into him right here, and it says, but he turned, Yeshua turned to Kepha and said, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for your thoughts are not those of Elohim, but those of men. He wasn't even speaking to Kepha. He said, I'm speaking to hasatan. Because Satan has entered into you. And his goal is to stop this from happening. And later on we see, what does Kepha do? He tried. He tried to stop it. Y'all know that was Kepha asking the question. He might not have been asked. It doesn't say who asked the question. But he was the one just took the sword out and started cutting. And so now I'm hoping we understand a little bit more about his level of authority. He had to use what was already there. And he couldn't see the future because one second he was trying to kill him and the next second he was trying to stop it from happening. But that's simply because he didn't know the plan of Elohim. And so we got to stop assuming that hasatan knows Yahweh's plan. What does Jeremiah 29 say? Yahweh says, for I know the plans that I have for you.
Right.
He says, for I know the plans that I have for you. And so we have to rest in that. We have to understand, and when we get to the point where we get that, I think we can go a little bit further, be a little bit wiser, be looking for the right things, on the lookout for the right things. And where I really see this going, as I was going through this lesson, and I still have another section, which is understanding his ending, understanding his demise, and I don't think that'll take a whole lot. But the next thing is now understanding then what is the other part of this adversarial relationship. And the best phrase I've ever heard, I was a kid when I heard it, and it made so much sense then, and it just makes so much sense now. My biggest enemy is my inner me. And so then we'll begin to understand that instead of us always blaming the devil, then we don't try to do right. We don't try to fight. We don't try to prepare ourselves. Then we understand that some of this is in our sinful nature. Then it will give us a better perspective. So we're going to stop right there and we'll pick back up. Amen.
Amen.